The last time our entire family was together, we were burying the glue that held us all in place. Grandma June's funeral was a somber, gray affair, but even through the grief, there was a familiar warmth, a shared language of sidelong glances and squeezed hands. We were a phalanx of mutual support, a sprawling, chaotic, but ultimately unified clan. I remember standing at the graveside, my hand on my father's stooped shoulder, watching my cousins huddle together. We were the children of a kingdom that had just lost its queen, but we still believed in the kingdom itself. The foundation felt solid, even with its cornerstone gone. That was the last day of the before. A week later, we gathered in the overly warm oak-paneled den of Grandma's house. The house. The one where the wallpaper held the ghosts of 1,000 Sunday roasts, where the floorboards creaked a specific symphony of our collective childhoods. This was the stage for all our memories. Christmas mornings with wrapping paper avalanches, 4th of July barbecues where the air swam with the scent of charcoal and citronella, the chaotic, loving mess of us. We were all there. My father, the quiet, dependable engineer. Uncle David, loud and boisterous, already pouring himself a scotch from Grandma's crystal decanter, a man who filled silence with noise. Aunt Lena, the perpetual worrier, fussing with the lace doilies as if their alignment could somehow order the universe. And Uncle Rick, sitting quietly in the armchair by the fireplace, his wife Carol's hand resting on his. Rick was the family's quiet heart. A carpenter, a fixer of things. He had built the treehouse in the backyard, had repaired my first car with infinite patience, had a laugh that started deep in his chest and made everyone else join in. He was the living image of his father, my grandfather, or so we had all spent our entire lives believing. The lawyer, a Mr. Evans, was a small, precise man who looked out of place amidst our robust emotional clutter. He cleared his throat, the sound like a dry leaf skittering across pavement. "The last will and testament of June Elizabeth Miller is straightforward in its material bequests," he began, his voice a monotone drone. He listed the items. The house was to be sold and the proceeds split evenly between her 3 children, David, Lena, and Rick. Her jewelry was to be divided among the granddaughters. Her prized ceramic rooster collection went to the grandsons. It was all so expected, so perfectly her. A wave of sad relief washed over the room. This was order. This was continuity. Then Mr. Evans paused, adjusted his glasses, and placed a single cream-colored envelope on the table. "However," he said, and the single word sucked all the oxygen from the room. Mrs. Miller left a separate instruction. She requested that I read this letter aloud to all of you, together, at this time. A ripple of confused curiosity went through us. I saw my Aunt Lena freeze, her hand hovering over a porcelain shepherdess. Her face, usually an open book of mild anxiety, became a closed door. "A letter?" my father asked, his voice low. "What kind of letter?" "A personal one, from your mother," Mr. Evans replied, picking up the envelope with delicate fingers. "Written approximately 1 month before she passed." We leaned in, a single organism yearning for comfort. We expected final wisdom, a benediction from the matriarch, a piece of her soul to tuck into our own for the long road ahead. We expected closure. What we got was a lit fuse.
The lawyer began to read, and Grandma's voice, so vivid in my memory, seemed to animate his dry tones. "My dearest family," it began, sweetly, familiarly. "If you are hearing this, then I am finally at peace, and I hope you have all found some measure of it as well. I have lived a long, blessed life, surrounded by the people I love most. But a long life means you collect secrets, and some of them grow heavy. I have carried one such secret for 43 years. I can carry it no longer." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. My eyes flicked to Uncle Rick. He was staring at the lawyer, his expression one of gentle puzzlement. "In the summer of 1979, the letter continued, your father and I were going through a difficult time. The business was failing, and the stress was a wall between us. I felt lonely and adrift, and I found comfort in the attention of another man." A collective sharp intake of breath. My grandfather? A saint in our family lore? A man of quiet strength and integrity? Betrayed? It was unthinkable. "It was a brief, stupid mistake," Grandma's voice from the grave confessed, a pleading note entering the lawyer's recitation. "A handful of weeks, but it had a consequence. Rick, my darling boy, you were the consequence." The words didn't just hang in the air. They physically struck the room, as if a bomb had detonated in absolute silence. The air itself seemed to shatter. I looked at Rick. The gentle puzzlement on his face melted, then froze into something else entirely. A blank, terrifying nullity. He didn't look at anyone. He didn't make a sound. He simply stared straight ahead, through the lawyer, through the wall, into some vast and terrible void. "Your father knew," the letter went on mercilessly. "He knew almost immediately. He was hurt, of course, a pain I regret until my last breath. But he was also a better man than I deserved. He forgave me. He insisted we raise you as his own. And he was your father, Rick, in every way that ever mattered. He loved you more than life itself. He never saw you as anything but his son." The lawyer paused, as if giving us time to absorb this, but no amount of time could ever be enough. The foundation of our world wasn't just cracked, it had been vaporized. Then came the second detonation, the one that would scatter the shards of our family into 1,000 irreconcilable pieces. "There is one more part to this," Mr. Evans read, his voice now seeming unnaturally loud in the petrified silence. "One other person in this family has known this truth. I confided in my oldest daughter, Lena, when she was 21. I was weak. I was burdened. I trusted her to help me carry it, to protect this family, to keep our secret safe until I was gone. I told her it was for the best. I see now that I may have been wrong. I hope, with this truth finally in the open, that you can all find a way to heal. I love you all. Please, don't let this break you." The lawyer stopped. The final word, break, seemed to echo in the absolute stillness. Then movement. Uncle Rick stood up. It wasn't a violent motion. It was slow, mechanical, as if his muscles were operating under a gravity we couldn't feel. He didn't look at his mother's letter. He didn't look at his siblings. He didn't look at any of the nieces and nephews who had called him uncle their entire lives. His face was a mask of such profound,
utter dislocation that it was more frightening than any outburst of anger could have been. He just walked out. His wife, Carol, her face pale and stricken, scrambled after him, a whispered Rick trailing in her wake. Their 2 children, teenagers, looked around the room with wide, terrified eyes before fleeing after their parents. The door to the den closed with a soft, definitive click. The sound was louder than any slam. For a full 10 seconds, no one spoke. We were a tableau of shock, a museum exhibit titled "The Instant Before the Fall." Then all the air, all the sound, all the pent-up horror rushed into the vacuum. Everyone turned to Lena. She was crying, silent tears tracking through her powder. She was wringing her hands, her body curled in on itself. "I promised Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I promised her I wouldn't tell. She said it would destroy Dad. She said it would destroy Rick. She said it was for the family." Uncle David was the first to break. He had been holding his scotch glass so tightly his knuckles were white. He slammed it down on the mantelpiece, the crystal cracking but not shattering. "For 30 years, Lena." His voice was a low, dangerous growl, all the bonhomie burned away to reveal raw fury. "You knew for 30 fucking years? You looked him in the eye, you called him your brother, and you knew he was living a lie? You lied to him for 30 years? "She made me promise," Lena cried, her voice rising into a wail. "She was my mother. What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to be his sister," David roared, the sound bouncing off the walls. "Your loyalty should have been to him, to the truth." And then the chaos erupted. It was like watching a single organism tear itself apart. My father, usually so reserved, was shouting at David to calm down. My other aunts were shouting at Lena, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of betrayal and accusation. "You're a traitor, Lena," David spat, the word hanging in the air like poison. "A goddamn traitor." "She was selfish," someone else shouted, a cousin, I think. "Grandma June was selfish and manipulative. This wasn't for healing, it was for her own guilty conscience." Old resentments, previously confined to hushed conversations and sidelong glances, now erupted into the open, fueled by this new cataclysmic fracture. An argument about money from a decade ago was suddenly relevant. A long-forgotten slight at a wedding was dredged up. The secret wasn't just about Rick anymore. It was the key that had unlocked every hidden room of grievance in the family mansion. Lines were drawn, not based on the new truth, but on old, festering wounds. I stood there, in the center of the room, watching the people I loved most in the world transform into strangers. I saw the faces of my cousins contorted in anger, their childhood bonds of friendship and alliance evaporating in the heat of this new tribal war. I saw my Aunt Lena crumbling under the weight of a secret she should never have been asked to carry, being verbally flayed by her own family. And I saw the empty space by the fireplace where Uncle Rick had been, a hole in the world that was already beginning to be defined not by his presence, but by his devastating absence. I didn't say a word. I just watched, and I felt a cold, hard stone of anger form in my gut. Anger at Grandma June for her posthumous grenade, for her cowardice disguised as courage. Anger at Lena for her complicity, for her 30-year silence. Anger at my father and uncles and aunts for their immediate selfish descent into recrimination. Anger at my cousins for picking sides in a war that had maimed the one person who didn't have a side, because he was the battlefield itself. But mostly, as I slipped out of that house of ruins, the sound of my family shattering still ringing in my ears, I was angry at myself. Because in all the noise, in all the fury,
I realized one terrible, undeniable fact. No one, not a single one of us, had run after Rick.
The days that followed were a strange, muffled period. The world outside continued with its bland indifference. Traffic lights changed, people brought groceries, the sun rose and set. But inside my own life, everything was draped in the heavy velvet of aftermath. My phone, usually buzzing with the relentless, stupid chatter of the family group chat, was silent. The digital hearth where we'd gathered to share memes, coordinate holidays, and check in was cold and dark. It had been deleted, or perhaps it had simply collapsed in on itself, a digital star going supernova. Thanksgiving was the first official monument to our collapse. For 42 years, it had been held at Grandma's house. The scent of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie was the scent of my childhood. This year, there were 2 dinners. My father, siding tacitly with David in the Great Schism, hosted one. It was a strained, quiet affair. My mother had cooked a turkey breast, not the whole bird. The absence was a physical presence at the table, an empty chair that was, in reality, 24 empty chairs. We talked about work, about the weather, about anything but the canyon that had opened up in the center of our lives. It was a meal of ghosts. I heard through the fractured grapevine a text from a cousin who was trying and failing to remain neutral that Lena had hosted a smaller dinner for her immediate family and a few sympathizers. I imagined it was even bleaker, a meal eaten under a cloud of shared culpability. I became an archaeologist of my own memories, sifting through the past, looking for clues I had missed. That time when Rick was a teenager and someone had joked he didn't look anything like Grandpa, and Grandma had laughed a little too brightly and changed the subject. The way that Lena had always been fiercely, almost pathologically protective of Rick, rushing to his defense in any minor argument. I had thought it was sisterly devotion. Now it looked like a lifelong penance. My anger didn't subside, it mutated. It curdled into a deep, persistent disgust. I was disgusted by the performative nature of it all. The Facebook posts from David's side of the family, photos from past Thanksgivings with captions like "remembering real family values," the pious, wounded comments from Lena's camp. It was all a grotesque pantomime. They were fighting over the corpse of the lie, using it as a banner for their own petty grievances, while the living, breathing man at the center of it all was being treated like a philosophical concept.
Rick. His name was a constant, throbbing ache in my mind. I'd see something, a TV show about woodworking or pickup truck like his, and my hand would twitch toward my phone. I'd pull up his contact, I'd stare at his name, and I would freeze. What would I say? "Hey, Uncle Rick, sorry your entire identity was just obliterated and your family turned into a pack of rabid wolves. How are you holding up?" The inadequacy of any words was absolute. My own cowardice was a thick, sour taste in my mouth. I was a part of it. My silence was a vote. By not reaching out, I was, de facto, on the side of the chaos. I was accepting this new, broken geography. Christmas was worse. The split was now formalized, institutionalized. My father's Christmas Eve party was a somber gathering. The few cousins who came moved around each other like polite ghosts. The air was thick with everything unsaid. At one point, my father put on the old family recording of Bing Crosby's White Christmas. It had been a tradition since before I was born. We all fell silent, listening to the crackly recording, and I saw my father's shoulders slump. He was remembering what I was remembering, the entire family crammed into Grandma's living room, Rick leading a horribly off-key sing-along, Lena laughing so hard she cried, David pretending to conduct us all with a candy cane.
The memory was so vivid, so full of light and life, that the present moment felt like a cheap, faded forgery. My father caught my eye, and for a fleeting second I saw the same bewildered grief reflected in his face. Then he looked away, and the mask of stoic normalcy slid back into place. The new year dawned cold and gray. The anger in me had hardened into a resolution. This couldn't be the end of the story. This couldn't be Grandma June's final ugly legacy. We couldn't just be a cautionary tale about the dangers of truth-telling. The family I remembered, the one that I had loved so fiercely, couldn't have been a complete illusion. Could it? It was a Tuesday in mid-January, the most nondescript of days, when I finally broke. I was in my garage, looking for a spare wrench, and my hand brushed against a wooden box. I pulled it out. It was a small, beautifully crafted keepsake box. Rick had made it for me for my 16th birthday. He taught me the basics of woodworking in his garage, his large, capable hands guiding mine, his voice patient and kind. He said, "The wood has a grain, see? You don't fight the grain. You work with it. That's how you make something strong, something that lasts."
I ran my fingers over the smooth dovetail joints, the satin finish. I opened it. Inside was a collection of trivialities, old concert tickets, a fossil I'd found as a kid, a photo. The photo was of me, aged maybe 10, sitting on Rick's shoulders at a family picnic. I was grinning, missing 2 front teeth. He was grinning up at me, his face full of uncomplicated, unadulterated love. A sob ripped out of me. So sudden and violent, it doubled me over. It wasn't a quiet cry, it was a visceral, physical eruption of all the grief and anger I'd been storing up. I wept for the man in the picture. I wept for the boy on his shoulders. I wept for the loss of it all. And in the cathartic vacuum left by that storm of tears, a single clear thought emerged. It didn't matter what I said. It only mattered that I showed up. I had to go see him. The drive to Rick's house was an hour-long exercise in sustained panic. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I rehearsed 100 speeches, each one more stupid and inadequate than the last. What if he slammed the door in my face? What if the sight of me caused him more pain? What if he was gone, truly gone, in a way that a visit could never remedy? His house was at the end of a long gravel lane, surrounded by pine trees. He'd always loved the solitude. Now it felt like a fortress. His truck was in the driveway. The sight of it sent another jolt of anxiety through me. He was home. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I rehearsed 100 speeches, each one more stupid and inadequate than the last. I watched the smoke curl from his chimney. It was a cold day, and the image should have been cozy, inviting. Instead, it felt like a signal from a distant, inaccessible shore. Finally, I forced myself to get out. The crunch of the gravel under my feet was obscenely loud in the quiet woods. I walked to the front door, my legs feeling like they were made of wood themselves. I raised my hand to ring the bell, my finger hovering over the button. I took a deep, shuddering breath and pressed it. The chime echoed inside. I heard footsteps, slow, heavy. The door opened. It was Rick, but it was a version of Rick I didn't recognize. He'd lost weight. His flannel shirt hung loosely on his frame. His face, usually so open and expressive, was closed, the lines around his eyes and mouth etched deeper, as if by a cruel tool.
He looked older than he had just a few months ago. He looked hollow. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Uncle Rick," I said, my voice coming out as a dry croak, I was in the neighborhood." It was a pathetic lie, and we both knew it. He continued to stare, and for a terrible moment, I was sure he was going to close the door. I could feel the rejection looming, the physical force. Then something in his eyes shifted. A flicker of not warmth, not welcome, but perhaps a weary acknowledgement. He stepped back, a silent invitation. I walked into the house. It was neat, tidy, but it had the sterile feel of a place that was being maintained, not lived in. The soul was gone. The television was off. No radio played. The only sound was the crackle of the fire in the wood stove. "Do you want coffee?" he asked. His voice was flat, stripped of all its familiar cadence. No thanks, I'm fine." He nodded and walked into the living room, sinking into his worn armchair. I sat on the edge of the sofa, facing him. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I don't know what to say," I began, the rehearsed speeches evaporating from my mind. "I'm so sorry, Rick, for everything, for not coming sooner, for all of it." He was silent for a long time, just looking into the flames behind the glass door of the stove. "Why did you come, Ben?" he asked, not looking at me.
The question, direct and unadorned, hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had to answer with the same raw honesty. "Because I couldn't stand it anymore," I said, my voice trembling. "Because I've been so angry at Grandma, at Lena, at everyone for fighting and posturing and forgetting about you. And I was angry at myself for being a coward, for not knowing what to do. That box you made me, I found it today. And I remembered you in your garage teaching me about the grain of the wood. And I realized that the man who taught me that's my uncle. That's the only thing that has ever mattered." He didn't move. A log shifted in the stove, spitting a spark. "He've all called, you know. David, Lena, your father. Eventually, after a few weeks, they left messages. They wanted to explain, to justify, to tell me their side of the story. He finally turned his head and looked at me, and the pain in his eyes was so profound, it felt like looking into the sun. He took a slow, shaky breath. For 43 years, I knew who I was. I was Frank Miller's son. I had his hands, people said, his temper, his sense of humor. It was the bedrock of my life. Every memory I have of that man, every lesson he taught me, every time I was proud to be like him, it's all been retroactively poisoned. Was he looking at me and seeing another man? Was every act of kindness a monumental effort of will? Was every punishment harsher because of the secret? "Rick, he loved you," I said, desperately. "The letter said he did. We all know he did." "Do we?" he asked, and the question was a blade. "How can I know what was real? My own mother, she looked at me every day of my life and saw her secret. She let me love a man I had no right to love. And my sister, who I trusted more than anyone." His voice broke for the first time. He looked away, swallowing hard.
For 30 years, Lena knew I was a living, breathing monument to our mother's betrayal, and she treated me to coffee every Sunday and talked about the weather.
The sheer, mundane horror of it finally fully dawned on me. It wasn't the affair that had destroyed him. It was the decades of normalcy built on top of it. It was the conspiracy of the everyday. "I don't know who I am," he whispered, the words barely audible. "I feel like I've been erased. The person I was died in that room, listening to that lawyer. And I don't know what's left." I had no answer for that. There was no answer, so I didn't offer one. I just sat there, in the silence of his pain, and let it be. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't try to offer platitudes. I just witnessed it. After a long while, I spoke again. "I miss you," I said, the simplicity of it feeling like the truest thing I'd said all day. "I don't care about the biology. I don't care about the secret. I care about the uncle who taught me how to swing a hammer and not be afraid of the noise. I care about the man who built my parents' deck and fixed my car. That's my uncle. That's you." He didn't reply, but he didn't tell me to leave. We sat in the quiet growing dark of the afternoon, the fire slowly dying in the stove. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't a healing. It was just a presence, a single fragile thread thrown across a canyon. When I finally stood to leave, he walked me to the door. "Thanks for coming, Ben," he said. The flatness was still there, but there was the faintest hint of something else beneath it. Not warmth, but perhaps a lessening of the absolute cold. "I'll come again, if that's okay," I said, holding my breath. He looked at me for a long moment, then gave a single, slow nod. "Okay." It was just one word, but it was a beginning. I started visiting every Saturday. I didn't call ahead. I'd just show up with a six-pack of the local beer he liked or a pie from the bakery he'd always favored. The first few visits were much like the first, long stretches of silence, punctuated by stilted, careful conversation. We didn't talk about the family. We didn't talk about the letter. We talked about the weather. We talked about a squirrel that was tormenting his bird feeder. We talked about a new saw he'd bought. I was learning to speak a new language with him, one without the shared history that had now become a minefield. It was exhausting and heartbreaking, but I kept showing up. One Saturday, in early spring, I found him in his workshop, the garage filled with the sweet smell of fresh-cut pine. He was planing a board, the rhythmic shushing sound of familiar music. He looked up as I entered, and for the first time, I didn't see the hollowed-out ghost. I saw a flicker of the old Rick in his eyes. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied, setting the beer on his workbench. "What are you building?" "A new mailbox post," he said. The old one rotted at the base. I picked up a piece of the scrap wood, running my thumb over the smooth surface. "Can I help?" He looked at me, a considering look. Then he nodded toward a second plane. "You can help me get this board flat. Remember, with the grain, not against it." My hands were clumsy, my technique rusty, but I worked alongside him. The silence now a comfortable, shared space, filled with the purposeful sounds of creation. We worked for an hour, not talking much, just measuring, planing, sanding. It was the most peace I'd felt in months. When we were done, we sat on upturned crates in the driveway, drinking the beer and looking at our handiwork, a sturdy, well-crafted post,
ready to be planted in the earth. Carol left, he said suddenly, his voice quiet. I froze, the beer bottle halfway to my lips. What? A month ago. She said she couldn't reach me. She said I was a ghost in my own house. She's staying with her sister. Rick, I'm so sorry. He shook his head, taking a long swallow of his beer. Don't be. She's not wrong. I have been a ghost. How can I be a husband to her when I don't know who I am to myself? He looked at me, and the raw confusion was back. She wants me to go to therapy, to process it. How do you process something like this, Ben? What is there to process? It's not a feeling, it's a fact. My life was a lie. Not all of it, I said softly. This isn't. I gestured to the mailbox post. To us, the two of us, sitting in the cooling afternoon air. This is real. The wood is real. The work is real. The beer is real. And I am your nephew. That is real. It doesn't have a damn thing to do with who your biological father was. He was silent, absorbing my words. The old family mantra, the one we'd all clung to, was, blood is thicker than water. But we'd misunderstood it. The full phrase is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds you choose, the ones you forge in shared trials in quiet moments, are stronger than the accidents of birth. David called again yesterday. He's sorry. He wants to have a barbecue, to clear the air. Lena has written me letters, long, tear-stained letters full of apologies and justifications. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know, he said honestly. I'm not ready. Their truth, it's too loud. It's all about their guilt, their pain, their betrayal. There's no room in it for mine. He looked at me, and you were the only one who came and just sat in it with me. You didn't try to explain it away. You didn't ask for anything. I'm here for you, however you need me to be. He finished his beer and stood up, brushing the sawdust from his jeans. Help me plant this post. We dug the hole together at the end of his lane, the rich, dark soil giving way to our shovels. We set the post in, straight and true, and packed the earth firmly around it. It was a simple, concrete act. We were literally planting something new, something that would stand at the entrance to his world, a small declaration of stability. As we tamped down the last of the dirt, Rick put a hand on my shoulder. It was the first time he had initiated any physical contact since before the reading of the will. Thank you, Ben, he said, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite name. For what? For the post? For showing up, he said. For reminding me that not everything from my old life was a lie. It wasn't a happy ending. Carol was still gone. The family was still shattered. The hurt was a deep, permanent river running through all of us. But standing there, with him, at the end of his lane, with the new post standing straight against the twilight sky, I felt a fragile sense of hope. Our family fell apart not because of the lie, but because when the truth came out, we forgot how to be a family. We forgot that love isn't about shared blood. It's about shared grain. It's about showing up, planing the rough edges together, and building something new from the broken pieces, even when the blueprint is lost. The closeness I'd thought we had wasn't just the space between lies. It was real. It's just that its true strength was never tested until the foundation gave way. Now, we get to see what we can build from the rubble. What's the most unexpected family secret you've ever discovered? Share your story in the comments below. For more tales of complex relationships and the secrets that define us, subscribe for new videos every day.